Welcome everybody to our online seminar on maximizing the impacts of energy access on people's development. My name is Willington Ortiz. I'm a researcher at the Wuppertal Institute for Climate, Environment and Energy, and there I coordinating the initiative Vision of Sustainability. And I will have today the honor of introducing the topic and moderating the discussion with a great selection of speakers. I just want to say first, this online seminar is the first of a series of seminars that is being organized in collaboration between Access Coalition and the initiative Vision of Sustainability. This series of talks is part of the strategy of the learning group of the Access Coalition. And the overarching goal is to facilitate the exchange of knowledge and lessons learned about how to better deploy the development potentials of our efforts for achieving universal access to clean and affordable energy. Thus, the webinar of today will provide an introduction to the most important challenges and issues that should be tackled by any type of energy access intervention in order to maximize their contribution to multiple SDGs. Well, now I've seen that some people are coming in now. Probably I will wait a little bit. Yeah, thanks to all of you that already connected. Yeah, welcome everybody. I see people coming in. Thank you for attending our webinar. I would like to mention that this webinar today is the first one of a series that we are coordinating together with the learning group of the Access Coalition and the Visions Initiative of Sustainability. And for the first webinar today, we have the fortune of having today 3 speakers with long experience and deep understanding in the energy access. And they also bring 3 different complementary perspectives. But before starting with the talks they have prepared, we are very curious about you, about our audience. Therefore, we have prepared a couple of polls only to know a little bit more about you. So I would like to invite you to respond our first poll, which is about where are you connecting today? From which part of the world are you connecting today? So we are very curious about our audience. Are you from Africa now, or are you located in North America, in South America, Asia, or Europe? So I would like to invite you to say to us, let me say in that way, where are you located, so that we and our speakers have an overview at least of who is attending, who is our audience. I see some, yeah, we see some people coming in now. So I'm invite you, the ones that are coming in now. Welcome to all of you. We are very interested in understanding a little bit about our audience. Therefore, we would like you to answer this question. Are you now located in Africa? Are you in Asia, South America, North America, or Europe? So I see that most of you already responded. Probably we can close now. My colleagues will help me on that, and we will see. Yes. Oh wow, we have a very well distributed audience. We have people from Africa, Asia, South America, and Europe. Wow, great that I know from African and European time is a good time. For South America, it's a little bit too early. Thank you, all of you, for being with us. So we will also like to know from our second question to know a little bit about you is about where or for which sector you are working. So we will really like to know what kind of perspective you are bringing here to the webinar. Are you from research or academia, from an civil society organization, from a private company, probably suppliers, technology suppliers? So our aim is in this webinar series is to facilitate exchange of knowledge and experience among experts from all these sectors. So today, for example, we will hear insights from the research and academia, from a large international organization, and a perspective from the civil society organization. But we are already planning the next webinars for which we are inviting experts from private sector, from banks, from governments. So I see most of you have responded. Let's take some seconds for those that are still well. Nice. So we have, wow, we have a lot of civil society organization, a good, well, government, and we will need to take more of our promotion reserve for inviting colleagues from the private sector. So thank you very much. Before introducing our first speaker, I would like to make two additional remarks very shortly. This webinar will comprise two main blocks. In the first block, we will hear short talks prepared by the speakers as response to guiding questions that we propose to them. And in the second block, we would like to spark an interactive discussion with the experts in the panel. And therefore, please take note of your comments, questions, and share them with us on the chat of the webinar, because your remarks and questions will be extremely important to take advantage of the knowledge and experience of these speakers. So, no introduction anymore. I would like to invite Dr. Lon Singh to our digital stage. Dr. To is Joint Director of the Center for Sustainable Transitions, Energy, Environment, and Resilience. The abbreviation is STEER at the Loughborough University. She holds an Engineering for Development Research Fellowship funded by the Royal Academy of Engineering. And her research tackles the challenge of providing access to affordable, reliable and modern energy. The SDG 7, which is the main topic of us today, but in the context of increasing stress and shocks, such as climate change, disasters, conflicts. So her research is focusing on enhancing community energy resilience, or resilience is a very key concept for her research, and using renewable energy in South Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and the Pacific. I would like to invite Dr. Lon Singh. Thank you for being with us, and we invite you to reflect a little bit about how can our efforts in advancing universal access to clean energy really contribute to advance other sustainable development goals. What are those key issues that should be considered in order to deploy those synergies? The floor is yours, Lon Singh.
Great. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Sorry, I seem to have, there we go. Yeah, thanks so much for the opportunity to reflect on the Sustainable Development Goals and how energy can help to really achieve them. So, here we are. Energy is part and parcel of the agenda for 2030, as Sustainable Development Goal 7 is very much focused on delivering universal energy access, right? So looking at each one of the Sustainable Development Goals, there's actually targets under each one of the Sustainable Development Goals. So some colleagues at UCL and I looked at whether energy, a change in the energy system is required to achieve each one of these targets. And then we also looked at whether there was evidence for synergies and trade-offs between energy and Sustainable Development Goal 7, which focuses on energy as well. So what we found was that, yes, absolutely, energy is linked with all of the Sustainable Development Goals. In fact, action on energy is required to achieve around 65% of the Sustainable Development Goal targets. So this covers areas like climate change, reducing death from pollution, improving justice. So it's very broad range. And now looking at synergies and trade-offs. So in terms of synergies, we found that it was really quite broad-based again. Around 85% of the Sustainable Development Goals targets were linked to the achievement of SDG 7 on energy as well. And it's really broken down into 3 areas: welfare and well-being, infrastructures, and environment. So for example, in welfare and well-being, energy is really required to reduce poverty by providing access to healthcare, education, water, and sanitation. In infrastructures, energy infrastructures really supports other kinds of infrastructure like food and water, medical facilities, and sustainable cities as well. And in the environmental sphere, renewable energy and efficient energy is really needed to achieve our environmental targets, such as the pollution issues that I mentioned before. But critically, there are some trade-offs between SDG 7 and the other Sustainable Development Goals. And again, it's broken up into these 3 main areas of welfare and well-being, infrastructures, and environment. In welfare and well-being, there are some local trade-offs, for example, for renewable energy projects. So if you're implementing a large hydro project, then that there might be some trade-offs with the local community's other development goals. And that the same thing applies for larger infrastructure projects as well. And as I mentioned before, energy services is intimately linked with whether we can achieve our climate change and local pollution targets as well. So the main point here is that, yes, there are many linkages between energy and the other Sustainable Development Goals, and we should focus on them in order to maximize the development impact of energy access. However, we need to think very carefully about each and every project to manage some of the trade-offs as well. So communities are not static, they are facing increasing shocks and stresses like natural hazards, COVID-19, conflicts. And so I believe that progress towards Sustainable Development Goal 7 and to energy access, that progress can't be maintained unless we look very deeply at resilience. And may I suggest that that starting point is from people's own strategies around energy resilience and energy access. So in my research on energy resilience in particular, I have seen how households and communities really try to improve their own resilience in disasters, but also everyday situations. And this has very wide-ranging implications for how we deliver humanitarian aid, international development, disaster risk reduction, and energy planning. We very often think of supplying energy services to people, but the reality is they're very active. So I want to give you 3 quick examples from around the world on how this is happening. So this is in China, in a rural area, where communities and farmers are very active in at the moment installing a wind turbine along with their local technician. So this level of technical capabilities is one way where people are very active in maintaining energy access and gaining energy access. The second is after the earthquake in Nepal in 2015, where I observed that communities were using their informal networks, such as through community groups, through neighbors, in order to salvage and to repair some of the renewable energy systems in their local area. So that's another way that people are really active and have strategies around energy access and energy resilience. And thirdly, in Malawi, they really face some stresses and shocks at the moment with both flooding and droughts. But there has also been a movement of decentralized governance, so of political decentralization, which has opened up the space for communities to take more active role in energy planning at the district level. So thinking about those wider governance structures can also help people to develop and implement their own strategies. And the last thought I would like to leave you with is actually, in my experience, co-designing both the agendas and the solutions in terms of energy access is really critical. It's not just about co-designing solutions, it's also thinking collectively about the space that needs to be developed. So I'll give you one example here. I held some workshops with a really large variety of stakeholders and organizations around this idea of community energy resilience, specifically in the electricity sector. And we did workshops in the UK, Nepal, and Malawi. And we came up with really three main areas of research questions around energy system design to improve resilience, the role that communities play in ensuring energy system resilience, and the role that those energy systems play in overall community resilience. So you see a two-way relationship there. So really today I have talked about four things. That energy has many linkages and synergies with the Sustainable Development Goals. Addressing resilience is needed to maintain progress towards Sustainable Development Goal 7 for all of the SDGs. And we need to start with communities' own strategies, and that we need to co-design agendas and solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lon Singh, for this overview of what we want to talk about today. So this is it's very impressive to see how you these graphics presenting the trade-offs, but also the synergies, and very much looking forward for knowing a little bit more of your observations in your research. I would like to invite directly our second speakers to the stage. She's Angelica Marina. Angelica, good morning. Thank you for being with us.
Morning,
Angelica is climate change programmer advisor for the UNDP, and in particular since 2011, working in the GEF Small Grants Program implemented by the UNDP. Angelica leads also an extensive portfolio in 120 more countries, focusing primarily on small-scale solutions, and led by civil society and organizations and communities. So she also oversees programs in Latin America and the Caribbean, and therefore we are very interested in your experience working on such a global program like the Small Grant Program, with this global perspective, but going in up to the to the very local level. So how does such a large program achieve that the supported energy projects that do effectively deploy those context-specific opportunities, let me say, of the people, the local people in such projects? What are those key features of your approach for deploying those synergies that was illustrated by Dr. Lon Singh? Thank you for being with us, Angelica. Please.
Thank you so much. Very, very pleased to meet everyone. Let me just start sharing the presentation. 1 second. Okay. And yes, so many things in common. I was listening to Dr. Long, so many things in common. We have very similar approach. So I will just start talking about it briefly, and then I hope we can develop further in the discussion. This is just a very short slide of the overview of the program. It's indeed a very large program, basically in all over the world, 126 countries. And our focus is local solutions to global environmental problems. It's funded by the GEF, Global Environmental Facility, and it supports community-based initiatives and actions as solution to larger environmental, bottom-up solutions, if you want, to larger environmental issues. And the program has been around for almost 30 years. And we had over 21,000 small projects around the world. The grants are small, about $50,000, but at the same time, they do together create and foster those solutions specifically locally, which is a very important component, because very often the big projects, they don't achieve the same. This is our coverage, just to understand that we are working all over the world. Among our countries are small island development states, least developed countries, middle income countries, and others, so very different contexts. Just to go directly to climate change programming, it's about 22% of our portfolio, and since our inception, as you can see, it's over 5,000 grants, 169 million in grant funding, and we also leverage co-financing, because each project attracts 50% of co-financing from the community, whether it's in their resources or resources of other projects that they're implementing. I included the website, so you can read more about our program. Our approach is to provide catalytic financing. Obviously, it's a small amount that we are providing, the catalytic financing for community actions, which are always owned and designed, not just co-designed. Basically, communities get funding directly, so they're designed by the communities, and we are just trying to provide support. Renewable energy efficient technologies are a large part of the portfolio, so it's about 70% on focused of climate change portfolios focused on energy technologies, and they are always linked with socioeconomic benefits and improving livelihoods. We basically cannot focus on community level on resolving environmental problems, and that applies to climate as well as to biodiversity and others, without focusing also on livelihoods, because on the community level there is no distinction, and we cannot purely focus on global environmental benefits, as is the GEF, the Global Environmental Facility mandate. And right now, what mostly we are focused on is indeed improving livelihoods with an access to energy or transformation to renewable energy, supporting green recovery following the pandemic and other crises, including support of health facilities, digital technologies. We're also focusing on green jobs, trying to unlock the potential for the young people in developing countries. And our overall focus is to target the most vulnerable communities, those which are marginalized, remote, or otherwise disadvantaged, so that social inclusion is a very important component of our work. So just a little bit more on our approach. As I said, the community is not just co-design, it's actually community ownership. As Dr. Long said, it's very important, so we can't impose our designs, ideas on the community. We provide direct funding to the communities and let them sort of make mistakes and learn to manage this funding. We are emphasizing livelihoods, the linkage to productive activities which are connected with the energy use. So we don't simply fund energy projects, we only fund energy projects linked to productive activities, and that would be a precondition of funding such projects. We are also trying to track those so-called co-benefits or socioeconomic benefits of energy access, and with SDG linkages. We're tracking it through our annual report. Inclusion is very important, and I will maybe talk about it later. Hopefully I'll have an opportunity. There's a lot to talk about, but to understand that 40% of our projects overall in the world are led by youth, 34% are led by women, and that's not accidental. We made a concerted effort to include the more vulnerable populations, including people even with disabilities and indigenous people and some others, depending on the context of the country. For example, we're including gender and youth focal points in steering committees of our program. We are trying to earmark funds for specific programs, such as so-called innovation programs, trying to get some interesting ideas by youth, for example, to implement women entrepreneurs, to support women entrepreneurs, and some others. So this inclusion is part and parcel of our program, and also some concerted effort and more on a more global level. We also facilitate the empowerment, facilitating participation of civil society, also vulnerable groups such as indigenous people, women, youth, in dialogues that are ongoing in the country, for example, on environmental legislation, on climate legislation, on participation in the climate processes such as COPs and so on. So that's one of our focus, in a way, in support of our programming, in order to include more disadvantaged populations. And we're also working on enhancing capacities from learning by doing by the communities, giving them small grants, getting them to learn, providing these grants as seed funding so that communities can then attract more, and also helping them directly with technical assistance if needed, and with this participation in these dialogues and bringing their voices to national, international level. So that's another sort of component of our work. Some examples of some examples of our work would include projects such as Secret Grandmère, that in Mauritius, where a group of disadvantaged women who didn't have money to support their children and send them to school joined together in cooperative, where we provided clean energy and now they're solar energy, and now they are producing teas. And now they are producing teas that are being exported all over the world, and they now have money to support their livelihoods, to support their children. Another example is funding for community health centers in Niger, where the women who are unable to get medical assistance because they give birth, were unable to get medical assistance because they give birth at night, are now able to receive it because the community center got solar energy. So just some examples of the projects that we support. I think for some reason the last slide, something happened to it. 1 second. 1 second. I'm trying to come back to, yeah, here is the last slide. Just to mention very briefly, we are also trying to understand how to practically continue doing what we're doing. While we have these overarching principles, we have global staff around the world that we train in this and provide these principles, ensure that they have understanding of these principles. However, we are also ourselves trying to understand how to codify and systematize this approach using global practices, using global knowledge from organizations such as IAD. We teamed up with them. This is a think tank in London who are looking at those energy delivery models and advising other organizations how to best incorporate those, as they call it, success factors that help ensure sustainability of these small-scale energy investments. And we look at them at the concrete projects in our portfolio. I looked very much in depth, projects in Asia, in Africa, and identified those success factors. For example, community engagement, including consultations, community contribution, working through existing institutions to see how that's actually done, whether it's done, and how it's done in our program. So this work, we completed the first stage. Now it's ongoing. We are trying to see how to actually include it in our training, in our everyday work. I will maybe speak about it if I have an opportunity a little bit more. It's a very interesting work. We looked at how each project collects information, engages the community, does the analysis of what's contextual analysis of information about local context, needs, impacts, assessing project designs and changing these designs depending on the community needs, or building delivery model, meaning the actual implementation of an energy project. With consulting needs assessment and changing and prioritizing is possible if needed. Building demand for energy supporting productive services, as we know, and as we will talk more today, I think. We know that the community that doesn't have access to energy doesn't always also has other systems to support this access and to use this energy in a way that will increase resilience, increase livelihood. So we are working on that. How we ensure that we use locally appropriate solutions, and that's very important in all respects. Cooking is one great example on that, how people used to have certain traditions of cooking, for example, and the solution has to respond to those needs and to those solutions, to this understanding. And community financing mechanisms such as revolving fund or any other way of paying for this and maintaining the systems. So these are just a taste of what we are doing. So I hope to discuss this in more details with you in the discussion, and looking forward to your questions. Okay.
Thank you, Angelica. It's very clear now how important, even for such a global program, to get closer and understanding of those community contexts or the local people context. That's amazing and probably also very challenging. And you mentioned something about very strong, the idea of empowerment. And part of this empowerment idea that you shared with us was the awareness on what are the awareness and participation in policy planning, etc., and understanding what are the country-specific processes that are there in energy, so that the people can also participate and understand. And I think this is an important and a good bridge to to our third speaker, which is Grace Rono. And I would like to invite Grace to come on the stage, to our digital stage. So Grace, thanks for being with us. Grace is program officer at the Access Coalition. She is supporting activities and initiatives at this coalition, particularly providing also support to the regional nodes, and she brings a lot of experience in implementing projects in energy and climate change, and particularly this experience in the formulation of policy and on making advocacy on building the capacities of local organizations and local communities to be part of those processes. Therefore, we invite Grace to share with us some reflections on how can civil society organizations contribute to maximize the development impacts of energy access policies, programs, projects. Grace, the floor is yours. My colleagues will help now with the slides. Grace, the floor is yours, please. Oh, you have to unmute your microphone. Wait. No.
Thank you.
Yeah, now.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. As mentioned by my colleague, my name is Grace Rono from Access Coalition. And just today, we want to speak about issues of energy access, and not only talking about energy access, but how do we really make use of the opportunities that are there in terms of maximizing impacts of energy in the region. So kindly go to the first slide. So the Sub-Saharan region still faces many challenges in terms of energy access, and you find that almost 700 million people still lack access to energy, and you realize that's a very large population that is still not having access to energy. The other thing is that communities who are connected, for the other side, you find that they're still not able to really effectively make use of the connection that they have. In terms of they have connection to the grid, but then they're not able to use the energy effectively in their daily needs. So you find that there's very poor prioritization of energy needs for communities in terms of just using energy as an enabler for development. So there's a very important need to make sure that communities' voices are being heard and their needs are being prioritized in the energy planning. So the other thing is that there's lower uptake and understanding by governments of energy needs for communities, so that you find that there's a very strong skewed understanding of energy, and most of the investments now are going towards the grid connections, and you find that even the larger projects, large investments are really going mostly to the grid connections and to electricity. But then when you look at the other side of off-grid energy needs or off-grid connections, you find that there's not much being done there in terms of clean cooking as well. The government and many other key players, and also the investments, especially by the banks, the World Banks and the Africa Development Bank, really not paying attention to this, the clean cooking subsector, and as well as the solars, and also all these decentralized renewable energy technologies. So that is a very big gap that we see working in the region. And also you realize that the participation of communities in planning for energy is still low, and civil society and social enterprises are also not, the engagement can be more robust in terms of planning and decision making for these segments of the society. So if you kindly go to the next slide there. So just having that understanding or background in mind, then you realize that as civil society, we do have a very, very large role or gap to fill in terms of addressing the challenges in energy access in the sub-Saharan Africa. So what can the civil society organizations do? So most importantly is to bridge national goals with local action, whereby we are saying that in as much as we are having national priorities and aspirations, then how do we make sure that we are cascading these to the local communities or for local action? At the same time as well, how are we making sure that we are bringing the needs of the community and taking a demand-driven approach to energy planning, and also picking the energy needs and really prioritizing community needs into planning of energy policies in the region. So additional to that as well is to look at how do we make sure this process is inclusive in terms of energy planning. And I believe my colleagues have really spoken to this aspect, whereby really we need to make sure that we are assessing the needs and understanding the needs of the community. And then also, once you have an understanding of this and you're using this to design the programs or policies that you're putting in place, then also it's very important as well to make sure that you're evaluating the policies and programs to see that it's still catering to the needs of the poor and vulnerable communities that you're looking to reach out to. And also the other aspect as well, I think this has also come out, is the issue of finance. And you realize that finance is still a challenge, especially for the decentralized renewable energy solutions. So talking about solar and talking about clean cooking, you look at these areas and you realize that there's very little finance going to and investments going to this particular aspect of planning for energy needs in the community. So for us CSOs, then we really need now to step up and to speak up about these issues of finance to the governments, to decision makers, and to the banks. I think also there's an aspect whereby we really haven't paid attention to the fact that the banks, especially the World Bank and also the Africa Development Bank I mentioned, are the biggest investors in energy access in the Africa region. But then how often do they consult communities? How often do they consult the civil society? Because as civil society also you're speaking on behalf of the communities. And what are the opportunities and avenues for you as communities or civil society to engage both the banks as well as the government? Because you realize that there's a very huge gap and a very big need in terms of financing for local communities, local entrepreneurs who are working on these energy aspects, and also now in terms of also bringing in innovations. There's need for catalyzing finance in these aspects. And one example, I think, for recently we're talking about the VAT exemptions in Kenya and also in Uganda, whereby we were having exemptions to make sure that there is increased access to off-grid solutions. But then some of these policies then keep changing, and this really makes access to energy and access to finance for these off-grid and clean cooking solutions to become very expensive. And so we really need now to rally action as CSOs to make sure that our voices are being heard, and we're also making sure that we're bringing this agenda to the government and to decision makers. So also just talking about research, because now then also you realize that we don't have as much data on energy, on issues of clean cooking, and oftentimes you find that the data we have is a bit dated. And so really when the planning is being done and data that is used is quite dated, So it does not paint an accurate picture of where we are in terms of energy access, and also now highlighting needs and areas where the financing needs probably to be directed to. So for us as CSOs, then we need also to look at this aspect. I mentioned about issues of a conducive business environment, and how now can government also probably incentivize the work of local businesses who are working in the energy sector. Can we probably have grants also to support some of these initiatives and innovations, just to make sure that you're bringing them to par with actors, international probably actors who are already have that leeway to be able to work and already have the resources. So for us as CSOs then is to rally around these issues and to make sure that we're bringing out and also bringing out the voices of communities in the work that you're doing. So if you kindly go to the next slide, then that takes me to the role of access in coordinating all this, because then the work of civil society has to be coordinated in a way, and that is how now Access Coalition comes in. And Access Coalition is a coalition of 100 civil society organizations working both locally, nationally, and regionally to just make sure that we are advocating for people in poverty, living in poverty, to be able to access a safe and reliable energy, as well as it being affordable. Because I think when we talk about energy and we talk about access to energy, then a very important component as well has to come out in terms of affordability. What do we do now to make sure that energy is affordable as well to these communities? So that is the key mandate or commandate of Access, just bringing together civil society and also research institutions and as well as social enterprises to really now have a forum or an avenue to highlight some of the issues that I mentioned in terms of, and the gaps in terms of energy access. So therefore, for us, we want to make sure that we are doing this work both at the national level and also regionally. We are also working in the Latin America and also in the Southeast Asia, just to make sure that these issues are coming out. And also the other component that I need to mention is that we are working on.
Sorry, will it be possible to wrap up your conclusions so that we have so like more or less 20 minutes for talking together? Sorry, yeah.
Okay, thank you. If you go then to the next slide. Mm-hmm. Yes, so in a nutshell, this is how we work as Access. I've really mentioned most of the work that we're doing here. And then we have the component of knowledge sharing and capacity building. And this is one of the reasons why now we're having some of these avenues, such as the webinar we're having today, to just make sure that we are engaging, we are exchanging and sharing knowledge, and building and capacitating also our members and partners to make sure that we're responding to these issues. So just go to the next slide, Wellington. So in essence, I believe I've talked about the work that we're doing, and in general, then I will conclude by saying that for us as Access, we want to build partnership, and we want to make sure that we are reaching out to as many partners as possible to have strategic alliances to engage on energy and also nexus issues that will contribute to us achieving universal energy access for communities and poor and vulnerable communities in the region. So allow me to stop there, Wellington, and I believe then we'll be able to continue with the discussion in the next chapter of this webinar. Thank you very much, and back to you.
Thank you, Grace. Thank you for this broadening our spectrum about what is important for advancing energy access, and how this, let me say, this political dimension of energy is so important. We would like to start the conversation, so please share with us your questions, your comments, and before we start, we would like to have a last poll in which we would like to know from your perspective. We have heard about many different factors today, which are very important to take into account. So we would like to know from your perspective, from your experience, what are those issues that you think are more important when thinking on maximizing the impacts of energy intervention. So we hear today about understanding people, aspiration, needs, context, recognizing and deploying productive uses of energy, or is identifying and tackling inequalities like gender or inequalities also for the youth people, or investing in capacity building of local actors, or it's about the planning. What are these two main issues that you think we should talk about in the next webinars also? So I would like to know your ideas. Please select only two. We know you can select all, but it will be nice to know from your perspective, what are those two main issues that you consider very, very important? So I see that's half of you already sent your ideas. Yes, let's wait a couple of seconds more. We are very interested in knowing what are the priorities from your perspective, so that we also can design our webinar series. Yeah, let's wait. Oh, we'll see a lot of people answering now. Yes, yeah, probably we can close now and see what are your, wow. Okay, that's was also very very strong from our speakers. How important is this understanding aspirations and needs and capacities of people? Policies, of course, bringing people voices to the planning processes is also very important. Thank you very much. We will consider these for our next webinars. And just to remind you, our invitation to take part of the discussion and share with us your questions. For instance, one of the interesting concepts that you mentioned. So first, I would like to invite our speakers to the stage. So please turn on your camera so that we can have a chat and discuss together. With the thanks to all of you for your presentation, your insight. I would like to start with you, Dr. Lon Singh. You mentioned this idea of co-designing, bringing people in this design process. Can you enlarge a bit? What is this design about? So it's about only the artifacts, energy artifacts, or it's about management models or the financial perspective? What can you please, from your experience, talk about a little bit of those processes?
Sure, absolutely. And I really liked Angelica's intervention as well, that perhaps there is also community-led interventions would be even more appropriate. But I do think that there is something in co-design, because communities also need to engage others, to learn from others, and bring them into the sustainable development vision that they are presenting, right? So I think there is something to be said about dialogue. And what I'm talking about is really engaging at those multiple levels, that although we should be community focused and very much on the impacts, it doesn't mean that we ignore the larger scale issues and challenges that need to be addressed, such as finance, which Grace has already spoken about, and the energy planning pieces. And I think you're exactly right, Wellington. It's not just about artifacts, about poles and wires and solar panels, but also about the financial arrangements around that, around the supply chains for services, for those artifacts to be rolled out, about the capacity of people to understand, implement, maintain, and change the energy systems. It's about all of that. So innovations can be quite broad. Solutions must integrate all of these aspects.
That will be very interesting because Angelica also touched on this idea of the capacities and how you also from the program also has this possibility to improve, let me say, or strengthen, let me say, the technical capacities of the local organizations that you support. How are those what kind of capacities are addressed, for example, in your projects? So for deploying, for example, these productive uses, or for bringing the youth into the picture. It would be interesting to know a bit of that, Angelica.
Yes, thank you. First of all, Dr. Long, I meant co-designing is not bad. That what we say is just different way of expressing it. But yes, obviously communities need, especially energy projects, which need expertise. That's obviously what I meant, is that the solutions needs to be designed by the community, led by the community, with obviously technical inputs and technical assistance. Yes, the capacity building, capacity enhancement, it's an interesting question. I think there are a few things that we are doing and needs to be done on different levels. So first of all is technical, financial, and other capacities are needed depending on the communities we're working with. And if we're talking about remote or vulnerable communities, possibly in the practical sense, they haven't been handling money, for example, right? So this is financial. So we worked with the communities that never had accounting and they didn't know. So yes, so that kind of capacity, what our principle is sort of learning by doing, if you want, giving them a small amount of money, relatively small grants, which is a lot of our grants are even smaller than 50,000. And the communities can learn, sometimes develop this, get this person in their community who starts working as an accountant or in some capacity, and learn to handle money. Sometimes we kind of give them a possibility to make a mistake. Obviously, not 100% of projects are successful. Most of our projects are successful, but there are some that are not. So we have mechanism how to finish the project or close the project if it didn't work. But I think it's very important for the community to learn to deal with these financial aspects, obviously technical. And we tried all different approaches, from getting community members trained in maintenance or, for example, simple equipment, to actually training young people, particularly from the communities or from the country, to work and also create jobs for them. We have some very interesting examples. That approach also sort of alleviates some bottlenecks in the country. So, for example, one example, there's multiple examples in the Caribbean, where youth was trained in renewable energy installation, creating jobs for them, and they also would go to the communities and work there. Youth from the communities in some other countries like Dominican Republic and some others trained and helped to organize businesses such as hydroponics or some others, which would be connected with this energy access. So that's another. Also young engineers for microhydro, also a more systematic training, for example, of young people in Armenia, which we supported in the universities. And those were people from rural areas who would go back and work on installation of this renewable energy supported by the government as part of the NDC, as part of their commitment under Paris Agreement. So different examples. So this is so one is obviously the capacity of community-based organization, helping them to create a structure which can manage a project or manage the energy installation. Second, the skills, which could be on community level, but also on a national level. And I think also a broader approach to strengthening capacities is needed, which is, for example, participation, supporting participation that I said through dialogues, and also in our steering committees that govern our program in each country. Our program is decentralized. The committees have a gender focal point, indigenous people representative, if appropriate for the country. They have youth focal point, especially in those countries with high youth population. This is important because those people also will look at the projects to see how they represent their constituencies. So that's, in a way, it's also capacity and empowerment together, if you want. Finally, I wanted to again emphasize, I've been talking before with Wellington about peer-to-peer knowledge and South-South cooperation, what we call it. This is very important and underinvested area. We in our program are trying to invest in that, but it's also not easy because we don't have it as a separate, the donors often don't look at it as a separate area to invest. And I was given an example of a program we support in Francophone Africa, which is called Initiative Climat, the climate initiative, where the community members are meeting and they are exchanging on methodologies, appropriate methodologies. These are more focused on adaptation, although there's some cooking and solar technologies, but they exchange experiences on how they apply these technologies in their community. The NGO that works on this program is codifying the knowledge together with expertise, obviously, with the external expertise, and produces publications, videos, which are then in French, which are then distributed among those countries. So very much underserved area, underserved region, for example. And that's also very important because a lot of community members can actually learn from their peers, also with the help of podcasts now and new technologies. That's what we were piloting in Panama, and many others. So yes, so more investment on this peer-to-peer and knowledge exchanges, which are very important, and with the expert inputs. So
yeah.
this is my main point.
Probably I would like to say this webinar and this series that we are creating within the Access Coalitions is more or less talking on that direction. We think that it's very important to facilitate this knowledge exchange experience. You talk a little bit on this bringing youth, bringing women into your own steering committee. That's very interesting because it's a kind of really giving a political role to those people. And Grace, you also your intervention was pointing very much on that particular dimension. So to what extent this needs attendance? There are some questions from the audience, which is related a little bit on that dimension. How can this need assessment of the communities take place? So how is because I know you in Kenya particularly, you are now in a kind of process of bringing community knowledge into the planning process. Can you tell us a little bit about it, how you ensure in this case to bring these community needs into the planning process?
Thank you very much, Wellington. And so for us in Kenya, in the process that we are having, we are currently looking at developing an integrated energy planning tool. and so, or a framework that we really want to use to inform our actions or other actions of stakeholders in terms of energy planning. So I think just to bring, to give you some context is that Kenya is kind of a devolved state, or rather it has a devolved governance. So we have a national level kind of intervention whereby we are formulating policies at the national level, and at the same time we do have county governments, or I think what probably would be called districts in other areas. So at the moment, therefore, the energy policy therefore provides that we do have an integrated energy planning tool that we can use at both levels. And so counties are in the process of developing their plans. And then therefore, we are looking at how do we engage as stakeholders, as access. So what so far we are doing with the process is that the policy, or rather the planning, takes into account the different themes, the different themes in energy, be it issues of energy access, be it issues of bioenergy, be it issues of clean cooking, so that therefore we are reaching out to communities at the lower level, at the county, to make sure that we are getting the inputs from these. So the process therefore is kind of very devolved, let me use that word, whereby we are going to the counties and making sure that we have then formulate a stakeholders engagement platform. And then therefore, once we have this platform, we are able to get kind of prioritization of the needs and energy, let me say priorities and probably aspirations from the communities. And so how we formulate the stakeholders forum is that we make sure that everyone is involved. I think this has been mentioned, whereby we have representation for every segment of the community. And so therefore you see that everyone's needs will really come out at this point, because it's a lower level kind of engagement. And so therefore, then once we're able to collect these priorities, the priorities will be evaluated, of course, alongside our national goals that we have and national plans. And so therefore from there, I think we're able to see what are very important needs for the community. Because sometimes I think when you go to the community, you think that, oh, maybe cooking is very important to them. But when you have that discussion with them, you realize, oh, maybe it's an agricultural community, and maybe they feel like being able to irrigate their crops is very important. So we find that this is a very important action to take to ensure that we are consulting and getting the needs of the community. Then therefore, after that, we are able to bring all these needs and actions to the table from the different themes that I mentioned. And then we put all this together, and we have consultations, of course, as well, still at the national level, to just make sure that we are aligning all these things. And so once we have all these plans and priorities, then we're able to put this together. And then therefore this will inform our national actions and strategies in terms of energy interventions and actions. So that is how we are doing it right now. And Access has been privileged to be able to convene players and stakeholders in terms of energy access component, and now it's a process that's coming along, and we're very happy to see how this will go, and also now to see how we'll be able to share our learnings as well going forward. And just making sure that really all these things are being paid attention to as we go step by step. So yes, thank you, and back to you, Willington.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's quite interesting that you are in this process of opening platforms for dialogues at very county level, which is native, and you have in this planning process also platforms to bring that up to the to the national level. I think we will. That will be definitely one important topic to talk about, these different planning schemes, let me say, and how to bring the different stakeholders into that. I taking a look on the time. We have also a question or a comment from one of our participants there, and I will read because I think it's very interesting. There is a tendency to think of lights and water pumps, but are other needs like refrigeration or food preservation and security, funds for ventilation in mosquito-borne diseases prone regions, etc. There are a lot of other needs connected. I think we don't have too much time for going into that detail, but I will probably try to go into the general idea that Lon Singh talked to us. So I think you are right, your participant. Thank you for that. Yeah, and we tend in the energy axis, we tend to think too much on kilowatt hours or on or on kilograms of firewood spared. And what we have here today from all of you is that energy is about a lot of other things out of kilowatt hours, let me say. Yeah, like you mentioned, for example, Angelica, the people learning on accounting systems, improving the possibility to be in policy processes. Also, of course, technical capacities, etc. So I think this is very, very nice. I would like to wrap up. Sorry, because we don't have much time, but I think it is clear from what we heard today that it is this broadening our perspective on energy is extremely important, so that we really ensure that the kilowatt hours or the spared kilogram of firewood really have a big impact on the livelihoods of people. So, and that will be definitively this is our aim. And I would like to thank you all for sharing with us your experience. I would like to thank also our audience, and please, and also I would like to invite you to stay tuned with us. We will keep this series on broadening our perspective on energy. So keep tuned with our webinar series. And if I would also like you to invite, I would like to invite you to give us a very short feedback about our webinar today, which will be showed when we close the webinar. Thank you to all of you, and I'm very looking forward to have you also in the next webinars. Bye bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.